So, with the rising costs of production of some of our money, the conversation was coming up that we were eventually going to do away with a few of the usual suspects that were creating just crippling wastes of money, the Lincoln cent and the nickel. Um, to put it in a little bit of perspective, because this is how quickly things are changing, and we're just not thinking about it, and that's why the conversation is up. The president started with a conversation about stopping Lincoln cents as of this year, um, because essentially money is just it's leaking all over the place at a very rapid rate. So, as of the 2024 annual report of the Mint for that fiscal year, they had put the production value of Lincoln cents at 3.69 cents each. All right, that's expensive. That's nearly four times face value for whatever it's worth. And kind of think that as far as its usefulness you know, in commerce, it's virtually minimal to the point where it's almost zero. Um, which also kind of tells us that if the Lincoln cent did go away from strictly to its utilitarian usage, that it would be okay. Not a lot of us would care, because we're kind of living in a society where everything's digitally driven. We're paying more using our credit cards, our debit cards. We're paying with Venmo, PayPal, things like that. But 3.69 cents is a lot. But what was, when, at what point did we begin to see this just kind of go out of control? You would have to go only to 2022 when, during that particular same annual report that the Mint throws out for the fiscal year FY 2022, it was 2.72 cents, nearly one full cent less from a span of only 2 years. Now, what we do know is as of fiscal year 2024, the cost of making one Lincoln penny is 3.69 cents. So, how much higher is this going to go for fiscal year 2025? Remains to be seen. Here's how the hopscotch is kind of going the last 2 years. 2022, 2.72 cents to create one penny. 2023, 3.07 cents. So it actually went up, about 0.35 cents or somewhere around there, which is a lot, or 0.33, rather. But from 2023 to 2024, when the big thing that's really been weighing on everybody's mind has been inflation, in not this kind of like innocent, innocuous way, the Lincoln cent was showing also the inflation that was being kind of like taking control of our country just last year. From 2023 to 2024, a 0.62 cent rise. It's a lot. It's a lot just in the last year, considering that now it costs one full cent more to produce the Lincoln cent. Now, for the longest time, you guys, you and I know that it costs somewhere like 1.9 to 2.1 cents to create a Lincoln cent, and it's been like that since the turn of the century. Even there was talk about it in the 90s. It was just becoming way too expensive. But now it's even more egregious. So here's what the Mint is doing due to rising rates of production, is that they're scaling back on the mintages. Although when you look at the current circulating report through the US Mint for 2025 coins, it doesn't seem like that way. So, yeah, for 2022, or 2023 rather, the Mint had produced about 2.2 billion coins, respectively, for each of the Denver and Philadelphia mints. Quite a bit. Um, Last year, it dropped considerably. 2024, this was when the production or the cost of making one Lincoln cent 0.62 cents higher. And as a result, the 2.2 billion has now dropped down to about a third of that. 780 million cents were produced at the Denver Mint just last year. 734 million was produced at the Philadelphia Mint last year. So this thing is like free falling like you would not even believe. So, we're at the beginning of May. The new updated numbers are out. By no real surprise, we're still producing Lincoln cents. Denver minted coins for 2025, 413,400,000. Philadelphia Mint, 510 million, for a total number of 923,400,000. So it's roughly 2/3 of the way of the production from last year. So there's going to be no question about it. They're going to continue to make these. Usually production wanes a little bit during the summer, as it did last year and the year before, and so on and so forth. And no, flipping these on the secondary market is really not, garnering nearly as much money. Maybe a couple $100 for a full bank box of any one respective mint. But kind of like this big mystery X factor that everybody is trying to figure out what's going on. If the president is pushing to have the Lincoln cent stop, kind of like, what, today he said, we're going to reopen up friggin' Alcatraz. We're going to open up Alcatraz again. If you guys have ever done the tour of Alcatraz in the last 20 years, that place is beat to hell. It's going to cost an arm and a leg to refurbish that, and just to the current infrastructure of Alcatraz Island is it's like a crumbling fortress. My, how the mighty have fallen. That's exactly what it is. The same way with the Lincoln cent. We're probably end up seeing a much lighter mintage year this year. Whether or not it will be a whole lot drastically lower because of the. And I tell you what, I'm going to let the numbers speak for themselves for the rest of this year, because what I do know is 2026 is going to be a big deal. I feel like they're going to overproduce on all of the 250th anniversary coins that they possibly could. And then we are going to see some sort of kind of farewell send-off on what I believe the Lincoln cent. 2027, might be that year where that coin finally says goodbye. And it's more than just someone at a higher power saying we're going to stop it, because there's a lot of moving parts involved. Congress has to get involved. There needs to be stuff written into legislation to officially stop things like this, But what I can tell you is that there is more to the story than meets the eye. And a lot of you probably are not aware that the U.S. Mint actually outsources to a different company for Lincoln cent blanks, for blank Type 2 planchets. Now, when I say Type 2, they're going to have the raised kind of rim on them, so they're production ready, they're mint ready. You put them in a great big, hopper, and then you just let them fly, in the mid presses. So they're good to go right away. This particular company that they use, that they've been using for a long time, is called Artisan LLC. They're a limited liability company located in Tennessee, Tusculum, Tennessee, to be exact. They are a subsidiary of One Rock Capital. All right, so they Artisan LLC. They have a signed written contract with the U.S. Mint as being the preferred vendor for Lincoln Cent planchets, and that's at the Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint. The San Francisco Mint, by the way, with a really interesting story about, could they possibly close the San Francisco Mint? That I don't know if we have time to talk about in this video, but that is certainly another intriguing concept into the saga of, cost savings. I don't know. But what's not specified, ladies and gentlemen, is when this contract comes to an end. Because generally, I've worked in the corporate world, working for a few companies where we've signed like vendor agreements and contracts with companies for them to use our services. And there's always a kind of like a specified amount of time that you put in there for the contract before it expires, and then you have to like, it's as easy as like re-signing it. And then this is whatever the time is, okay, which right now it's a great big question mark, but I'm gonna kind of like dig deeper after today to see if I could find how long this contract is. And that may not be something that is kind of like public domain stuff. It might be, but I have a feeling that that's all very tight-lipped because we're talking about it, a government entity at this point. But I mean, as taxpayers, should we know that information? I mean, come on now. But I have a vested interest in finding out when this contract with Artisan LLC comes to an end, because whenever that happens, we could effectively kind of like count down the clock to the end of the production of Lincoln Cents. Because as of right now, there's been a few news outlets that have said, that there are enough blanks to fulfill supply and demand for production for the foreseeable future, and it's very vague, right? We don't know what kind of amount of time that is. Could it be 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years? Because also a part of this whole deal is, just because the contract or the vendor agreement with Artisan LLC comes to an end, does not necessarily mean that production of Lincoln Cents is going to come to a finite end at that point, because they are producing the blank planchets. They give us a cajillion of them, and then we're set for an unspecified amount of time. We might have enough Lincoln Cent blank rations at any one of the facilities that might cover us for 10 years. So there's obviously going to be a wind down, but you remember what I said at the beginning, where it's costing 3.7 cents to create a Lincoln Cent. Herein lies the issue of why that's so damn expensive. Is that we are not we as in me. I have nothing to do with what the U.S. Mint is doing, but the U.S. Mint is in bed with Artisan in some kind of like financial promise type of deal. And every time they have to renew that contract, whether it's every 2 years, every 5 years, every 10 years, whatever the case may be, Artisan has gone through various name changes over the years. A few of them that I did recognize, Jardin Zinc Products was one I heard about for a long time. That's in Greenville. There's a bunch of other subsidiaries and things like that. is that number that's agreed upon between the U.S. Mint and the supplier, that number keeps going up. The cost of all of that product continues to go up, and labor goes up as well. People are making more money, and the crazy thing is, the president's talking about tariffs, and everybody's talking about tariffs. Everybody's like freaking their minds out because product, all the cheap shit from China is going to be even more expensive. I mean, we've prided ourselves as a nation, the United States, of doing our own manufacturing. Remember during World War II and all that, when all we could do was depend on our own manufacturing, and we had our own, like, our steel mills that are running around the clock, and all that stuff that's producing everything that we need here as a nation. And I think just over the course of like the last like 5 decades, we've lost track of that. We've became ultra dependent and sourcing from other countries and then bringing it on board. Thereby kind of like showing us being more or less a very kind of like business friendly environment. Where other countries can develop this and that, build product, send it to us, and it's like there's no slap on the wrist for that. And then we've had to close lumber mills, steel mills, lots of jobs get outsourced, across the lands, across the globe, and it was only going to be a matter of time before all of that and the wages, they stabilized for like 30 years, during the 80s, 90s, and teens, or 2000s, early 2000s, where we've kind of enjoyed okay lifestyle, but you'll notice that there's been kind of like this Chinese fire drill trick thing, where, our people, here in the United States that were doing a certain type of skill set. Sure, they're a little bit more expensive, but we were going out, to some other country and hiring other people at a fraction of what we were paying this other individual. And then now it's like come to it, we became ultra dependent on all the rest of the globe, up until, we are sitting in a spot right now post pandemic where everything is just, it's expensive and it's really never recovered. Nothing has recovered since 2020. And that's our dilemma. And that's going to be the dilemma of the Denver Mint. You ever wonder why the silver proof sets are like $135 on the US Mint website when they used to be half that amount? And we're talking half that amount even going back to 2009 and 10 when silver jumped up to $50 an ounce. Silver mint sets, silver proof sets in 2010 and 11 were actually cheaper than they are today. And that's with silver being at $32 an ounce. Back then, silver was at $50 an ounce, but it was cheaper. Everything just doesn't make any sense. But today, it most certainly does because, everything, all the grubby little fingertips that kind of like lay claim to a specific product, they all cost more, and that's workforce and labor, that's supplies and product, just like the raw materials that it takes to produce the box for the silver proof set, and things like that, and now we're talking about losing and ditching the Lincoln cent, then it's going to be the nickel, then we're going to have to round everything up to 10 cents, and things are going to get even more expensive because now people are trying to pay attention not only to nickel and diming. That saying is going to go by the wayside, by the way. Now we're going to be talking about, diamond and quartering, is what it's going to be. I mean, I did run off on a little bit of a tangent, but I wanted to talk about this because it's been weighing very heavily on my mind about how, just everything that's been going on over the course of the last 5 years. And then we just now are seeing the writing on the wall. It's like, that's great that gold's at $33 an ounce, but who's buying it? The ultra rich. The ultra rich is buying that. The ultra rich is buying silver, you know, the people that can afford it. Um, but there's no trade off here with all this. The Lincoln cent will eventually go away. I think 2027, because 2027 is really going to be the conversation year. Because they're not going to tamper with 2026. It's way too important of a milestone of a date for it to just go away. They're not going to do away with Lincoln Cents in 2026. They're just not going to do that. But I think we're going to get through the next year and a half. Okay, 2027, the real conversation starts, and then lots of auditing and the bean counters are going to come out of the woodwork, and they're really going to hammer this home. Okay, and we're going to see a couple of things. We're going to see a wind down into production of probably all the coins across the board. Because right now we have plenty of circulating coinage to last us a while. We can't really say that with paper money. Paper money has a lifespan of 6.6 years for a dollar bill, and that's really not a lot of time. So they need to continuously refresh it. But when it comes to like coins, and all of its different compositions and forms and all that, those things tend to have a little bit longer of a life cycle than everything else. So we're definitely going to see a wind down. Don't be surprised we see mintages of a couple 200 or 300 million of each of the Denver and Philadelphia minted coins. After that period, because I think we're going to hit 4 cents for the production cost of each Lincoln cent by 2027. As a matter of fact, I probably would see that next year. It's going to be wild. I think because of the 250th anniversary, we're just going to see a pissing contest and how much money we can blow to fulfill our egos of just kind of making the 250th anniversary of that kind of importance, that we're going to just see a huge deficit just from creating Lincoln cents, and they will too. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, it's kind of crazy when we kind of dissect the numbers down a little bit. When your boy Blue loses his mind a little bit and goes off on weird tangents all over the place, but it all makes sense. Trust me. When we talk about it and we talk about all the various things that have happened in the past, what's happening now, what's happening in our government, in the world today, it's, I don't know, it's kind of wild and crazy. And I just am having a hard time finding the right words to help describe the environment that we're currently living in. I don't know. Maybe you guys can help me out there. But anyways, this is what I wanted to talk about to kind of kick off your guys' week. Is this kind of like a call to action to like, oh, let's go ahead and hoard all the Lincoln cents? Hell no. I will say this. I didn't check it. Copper cents. People have been kind of paying more attention to it. We were sitting really close to $5 a pound per pound. $4.72 a pound, and over the course of the last month, it did dip. It dipped on the 30th. It went from $4.87 to $4.61, and it's starting to make that climb back up. But all we had to do was go back not that long ago. If we went back to April 8th, ladies and gentlemen, the price of copper per pound was $4.14. And here we are. We were close, it got up to over $5 on March 26th. It came to this kind of like crazy looking Mount Everest looking peak, and then it dropped off April 8th. And then now it shot back up, to almost $5 per pound. So people are paying attention. Not as an alternative to invest in silver, because silver A is a little bit more pricier and people are making less money. And there's just inflation all over the place. A 12 pack of eggs is $10. It's, we're living in different times than we were in 2010 when we were going through the recession, because we're seeing unprecedented inflation. But nobody's making more money, unless you got yourself a really bitchin' upgrade in your job and you got a promotion and you're making like twice the salary than you used to, then yeah, I mean that's cool. But to as far as like a nation average, we are still kind of like all standing pat, the same number than we were 5 years ago. Nothing's really changed, but when we look at the number for overall inflation between 2020 and 2025, it's like a freaking huge ass gap, like that big, man. And to get from here to here, you're going to need either a helicopter, you're going to need some climbing gear, whatever. And it's like all this shit happening all at one time is going to eventually lead to the end of the Lincoln cent. Because when the coin costs 4 to 5 cents to produce each, something's bound to give, right? It's like that dam that fills up with water, on the backside of it. It's like we're beginning to see the cracks on that dam. And it's just like, we're there. But we can't do anything about it until 2027. That's the crazy part. From a symbolic standpoint, not just a collector thing, but some symbolism. 250-year anniversary is a big deal, and that's ultimately going to that's going to be kind of like the catalyst that ultimately explodes that dam in 2027. So we'll see if I'm right. I've been wrong before, and I'm okay with that. But it's always cool to take time to theorize about stuff like this, because it just means that the old, bowl of spaghetti up here is still rather lucid. I could still talk about some things that make some kind of sense. And, you guys are listening. I got my audience. So that's what I wanted to talk about. Thank you guys for tuning in. Have a great night. And I'll see you, I guess, on the next coin video. So long.